Hey guys, I'm Nate. Welcome back to the workshop. Not too long ago we made a video showing you how to make a copy of a vinyl record using a silicone mold and some resin. I used two types of resin for that experiment, the first of which I didn't put in the vacuum chamber because I explained that it cured so quickly it wouldn't have time to degas all of the bubbles. Well, that made a lot of you curious, I guess, because several people commented saying that they wanted to see what happens if we put that resin in the vacuum chamber. So that's what we're going to try out today. We've got my quick setting 2-part resin. We'll pour it off into a cup, mix it up, and then we'll put it in the vacuum chamber and see what happens if we let it cure while it's in a vacuum. We have our vacuum chamber and we have our resin, so let's get started. I'll be mixing up our resin in some clear plastic cups with some popsicle sticks, and I also have these paper plates which I've cut to fit inside our vacuum chamber. These are going to go down at the bottom of the vacuum chamber, and that's just in case any of our resin spills up over the edges of the cup. It won't bond permanently to the glass of our vacuum chamber. It'll just be stuck to these disposable paper plates instead. Cup should balance nicely in the middle of that, and hopefully, if we do have any spillage, it'll land on the plate and not on the glass. To start, let's pour off equal amounts of each half of our resin. Now, before I put these in a vacuum chamber, just as an example so we can see what changes, let's just pour one half into the other, mix it up, and let it cure in the cups. This is actually quite a lot of this resin to have in one cup. It's very thick at this point, and it's not usually designed to cast quite this thick, but we're gonna see what happens anyway. Now that should just take a few minutes and then it'll start to solidify, it'll get gelatinous and then turn hard. Feeling on the sides, it will also usually warm up as it catalyzes. So we'll be able to tell when the process is starting because the whole cup will start to get toasty. Looking down into it, there are a lot of tiny little bubbles, so the vacuum chamber really might do quite a bit to it. It's more of a honey consistency and less of an oil consistency. Oh, now it's more of a molasses consistency. It's getting very hot. Oh wow, and there you go. Now it's thickened up so much that it's not really even dripping off the popsicle stick anymore. There you have it, that is now catalyzed. It is no longer a liquid, it's still curing, it's still very warm, and it's still fairly soft, like it's a spongy sort of solid at this point. It will eventually get to the point where it's completely solid, just a hard plastic resin. Now we know what it looks like if we don't put it in a vacuum chamber. Let's try it in the vacuum. I'm gonna have to move fairly quickly, so I'll pour one half of the resin into the other, stir it up, and then put it into the vacuum chamber, throw the lid on, and get pulling a vacuum as quickly as possible. Here goes. Ooh, there we go. We've got like a foam forming on the surface now. Most of the bubbles have broken at this point. So we're looking like we just have a resin that's mostly degassed. It is still bubbling a lot, so it's not degassed yet. It's kind of a race. Will it solidify first, or will the gas all get pulled out of it first? There are still some bubbles coming out, but the bubbles on the surface don't really look like they're moving and popping very much. So I think our resin has probably started to cure already. I think that's it. I think our resin is no longer liquid. Couple little bubbles on the surface look like they popped, but for the most part that foam just sort of stayed in place where it was. Alright, let's look at this. It is nice and warm. I'd say it's definitely started to cure. Down here in our cup we have this gelatinous bubble foam on top. You can see it's cured. These bubbles don't pop, but they are a little bit squishy. I hope that demonstrates pretty well why I didn't try to degas this type of resin before I used it to cast a record. By the time it's pulled all of the air out, the resin has already set and you can't pour it into the mold anymore. There is a variation on this experiment that I want to try. A while back, I was playing around with what different chemicals you could mix together because that's my hobby. And I tried mixing some of this resin with a little bit of clear Elmer's glue. And the result I got was pretty surprising. Now as a comparison, remember, this is what happens with the normal resin when there is no glue added to it. Let's watch. hasn't cured completely yet, but it is getting there. It's not liquid, it doesn't fall out of the cup. It's pretty close. So let's try mixing up our same combination of resin with glue in it and see what happens if we have this reaction in a vacuum. Oh, we have a fast expansion now. Maybe too fast. The lack of pressure is just making it all destabilize and bubble. And there it goes. Up and out. This is why we have the plate. Just kind of a bubbling foam spread all over. The bubbling does seem to be slowing down. I don't know if that means the reaction is slowing down or if it means that the reaction is getting near the end and all of the bubbles are actually starting to harden in place. There we go. I think at this point our resin has probably cured most of the way, so let's add the pressure back in and see what happens to those bubbles that have already formed. Not a lot of change. There we go. It's still somewhat soft, but it's just all made up of bubbles. It's just like a gelatinous foam almost at this point. I don't know if I'll be able to get out from under the bubbles in this one so much. Well, there we go. Barely any resin stayed in our cup. Almost all of it bubbled out and spilled out all over onto our plate, which makes me very glad that I thought to put a plate in there. Other than that, yeah, we just have this sort of plasticky, sort of squishy foam going on. This is interesting stuff. I'm glad we didn't try making a record out of this. I don't think it would have played well at all. Some of it's obviously sticking to the plate quite a bit and I can't get it off. But I can peel off sort of the top layer and that's one heck of a texture. It's just made of bubbles, really, collapsed bubbles. Most of them popped as soon as we added pressure back in. Well, there we have it, a whole bunch of varieties of what happens with this resin if we put it in the vacuum chamber. We have our standard unvacuumed resin with no glue in it. We have the same resin put into a vacuum chamber and we got some good bubbling action on the top. It's solidified with all sorts of gaps and holes in it, showing why we didn't try to vacuum it before we cast our record with it. We then have the resin mixed with a little bit of clear Elmer's glue, which makes it foam up and bubble bizarrely. So we get this very lightweight, low density resin. And then when we take that same combination, we put that in the vacuum chamber, it actually bubbles so aggressively that it just comes right up out of the cup, spills all over, and doesn't hold itself together nearly as well. I hope you have enjoyed these tests of our resin in a vacuum chamber and mixed with some glue. If you have some other ideas of things you want to see us try, let us know down in the comments. Thanks for joining us for this video today, and remember to come gear yourself up with hats, shirts, and other cool merch at thekingofrandom.com. See you there. Doesn't look well. There we go. But they are a little bit squishy. Squish, 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 squish. See you there.
Hey guys, did you know that we're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as well? All at The King of Random, and every platform has a different purpose. So go scroll through the histories, check out what we're doing. I'll see you there.